The Green Knight, a fancy retelling of the medieval story of Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. The movie stars Dev Patel, Alicia Vikander, and was directed by David Lowery. And David Lowery is the man who directed the reboot or remake of Pete's Dragon a couple of years ago for Disney. A movie which, when I watched it, I watched 10 minutes, got super bored, and stopped watching. And if I wasn't reviewing it for this, I would have done the exact same with The Green Knight, because The Green Knight is the greatest load of bollocks. No beating around the bush with this one. And I already know there's going to be people coming along going, what are you talking about? This thing's amazing. Did you not read the book? Because that shit happened with The Midnight Sky. People going, did you not read the book? That means the film's amazing. It makes no fucking sense. People are idiots. Now, this movie has some spectacular visuals. And that's exactly why I was super excited for this movie, based on the trailer. The trailer looks spectacular. You've got giants, you've got talking foxes, you've got the Green Knight himself who looks like a fantastic character design. It looks like it's a really unique film, one of the most unique films we've had in years. And ultimately, it's a load of bollocks. And let me explain why. Now, the story aside for a moment, forgetting completely about the story elements of the movie, and focusing just on the filmmaking side of the movie, the filmmaking is one of the worst parts. For example, at the beginning, there's a voiceover as Dev Patel sits on a throne holding two things. There's a voiceover, and it's really croaky voice, like some of a voice you'd hear in a fancy movie like A Lord of the Rings. There's a voiceover kind of explaining where we're going. But the voiceover is so damn hard to hear. Not because the way the person's speaking, it's because the way it's mixed. Even to the point where Dev Patel goes on fire right at the start of the movie, and the sound of the fire is louder than the voiceover. You really have to focus to hear what they said. In fact, after I watched the movie, I went back and watched that opening part again, and I had to turn the volume up to 11 just to hear what she was saying. And I really had to focus even at that. And that's a problem throughout the movie in various places. Not all the way through the movie, but in certain places, the movie is very badly mixed. It's hard to hear in certain places because the music comes too loud, or certain sound effects comes too loud, or people are speaking way too quietly. One of many problems with the movie. The movie is one of the worst directed and edited movies I've ever seen. It's so disjointed in many places. And sure, someone will probably tell me that was intentional to like throw off the audience, but it's so disjointed and just jumpy in places that it's hard to put across a coherent story in places. Things just happen for the sake of it in this movie. We stay on shots way too long in this movie. There's a shot near the start of the movie where Dev Patel's character is heading out to find the Green Knight, and he sets out on his horse and he's walking down the road, and then he's walking down the road, and then he's still walking down the road. Okay, something's gonna happen now. Okay, he's walking by the camera. Any moment now something's gonna happen. Okay, we're in the next scene. Scenes like that kept happening where they'd focus on a random shot and just leave it. And sure, you could say they're letting the movie breathe. And I'd argue they're making the movie boring as hell, and they're trying to throw away a lot of the audience. This is definitely a movie for the pretentious people out there. Because there's always pretentious people who come along and say movies like this are amazing, even though they're a load of bollocks. So we'll get back to some of the filmmaking stuff, but we're gonna focus on the story. Here's the basic story of The Green Knight, broken down to its simplest form. Dev Patel's character is a knight, or a trusted man of the king. So the Green Knight comes along and he challenges any man of the king to try and hit him, and in a year's time he will return the same blow. Bear in mind, he at no point says, kill me, and in a year's time I'll kill you. He also says to try to hit him.
Let whichever of your knights is boldest of blood and wildest of hearts step forth. Take up arms and try with honor to land a blow against me.
We'll get back to that. So Dev Patel takes up the challenge. He sees this as his moment to impress the king. And the Green Knight simply surrenders immediately. So what was the whole try to hit me thing? Because he just lets him hit him. Now, again, he doesn't say kill me or cut off my head. He says nick me or hit me. Something to that effect. So Dev Patel could easily just hit him on the arm. But for some reason, which is still unexplained, he decides to cut off the knight's head. Sure, the knight bowed in front of him, but there was no rhyme or reason for why Dev Patel's character cut off his head. He'd been told just beforehand that whatever blow he delivers is going to be delivered back to him in a year's time. So for some random reason, which is still unknown to me, he decides to cut off the Green Knight's head. Now the Green Knight comes back to life, picks up his head, and leaves the place laughing. So Dev Patel, 1 year later, goes and meets the Green Knight, and the Green Knight delivers the blow back, or so we're led to believe at the end. That's the basic of the story. The very, very basic. I know I'm skipping a lot, but the very basic of the story is the Green Knight comes and says, someone hit me, in a year's time I'll hit them, and in a year's time he hits them when they hit him a year before. That's the very basic of the story. That's the core of the story. Nothing special at all there. Now, of course, a lot more happens within the movie. Dev Patel's character goes on this epic journey, or is it? He has these random encounters which oftentimes have no payoff. And there's many scenes within the movie have no payoff whatsoever. There's stuff that happens for the sake of stuff. So he meets a boy on a battlefield, played by Barry Keoghan, an Irishman, and him and his friends end up stealing from Dev Patel and leaving him on the ground. This leads to a scene where the camera pans around the forest, and as it gets full 360, there's a skeleton where Dev Patel had been lying, indicating he was dead and hadn't moved. And I guess it was a vision of the future if he didn't escape from a situation. So the camera reverses the spin, goes back the other way, Superman style from the original movie where he travels backwards around the earth to turn back time, and Dev Patel's on the ground, he just escapes then. So the point of seeing the skeleton was for no damn reason, other than Barry Keoghan's character saying to him, "You're already in the Green Chapel," something to that effect. The scene seemed to just be a space filler within the movie, and there's a lot of that. As I mentioned already, we've got scenes where they hold on the shot for so damn long. Even the start of the movie is just shot of animals on a farm for like 5 minutes. There's a goose fights a goat. That's probably the most entertaining part of the movie. But Dev Patel's character goes further on and he meets the woman from The Captain and the Winter Soldier, who was like the rebel leader. And he has to go find her head in a river. He goes, gets that. When he gives that back to her, his axe appears again, indicating he's in some sort of trance or drug loop or something to that effect. I don't really give a shit. So again, he goes on to, I guess, his next trial or tribulation. There's like a talking fox. And ultimately we get to a point where the movie's getting super boring and not a whole lot's happening. And all of a sudden, a hand comes on a mountain and we see giants. And I sit up and take notice and go, okay, here we go, it's getting interesting. And Dev Patel's character calls out to the giants, and the giant's about to pick him up, and then the fox talks to the giant. What does the fox say? And then I guess the director decided, I'm gonna be Christopher Nolan now, and the camera starts spinning upside down. We've got the ground in the sky in the ground, and the camera zooms forward, and it's super disorientating to watch, but I guess the director thought it was really cool. Then it just cuts to the next scene. Giants are gone, we never see them again. They were completely pointless in the movie, other than being a good visual. And Dev Patel, further down the line, gets to, I guess, a castle, or somewhere where there's another version of Alicia Vikander, who played his girlfriend, I guess, earlier in the movie. Joel Edgerton's also there, and there's a granny blindfolded. Ultimately, this ends up in a scene with the second Alicia Vikander character going to Dev Patel's bedroom, and then there's a lot of panting, and then she leaves, and then Dev Patel looks down on his hand, and he's got a lot of sticky white fluid in his hand, and he looks to the left, and the granny who's blindfolded is there staring at him. So I assume what happened is he was fantasizing about Alicia Vikander. He had a wank, and the granny was watching him. And then he jumps out of bed and runs out of the room and decides, I'm going to get the Green Knight, and then Joel Edgerton kisses him. So the long and the short of it, he gets to where the Green Knight is, and again, we get another scene where we wait. The camera just focuses on the Green Knight for way too long, and then on Dev Patel for way too long. And we just sit there for 3 or 4 minutes in silence. And then the Green Knight eventually wakes up and he goes, oh, you're here. Now, earlier in the movie, when the Green Knight appeared, he couldn't speak. The Queen was overtaken by this entity who had to speak on behalf of the Green Knight. There was like a booming voice coming. But later on, when we see the Green Knight, he can speak for himself. Ultimately, Dev Patel's character is on his knees, ready to receive the blow from the Green Knight in retaliation. But he runs away. And this is where the movie really speeds up pacing, because it's been a super slow-paced, terribly told, boring movie up to this point, but the pace ramps up rapidly now. Dev Patel goes home without consequence. The Green Knight doesn't come after him, but his life changes dramatically. His girlfriend, played by Alicia Vikander, gets pregnant, but when the baby is born, she's given money and the baby is taken, and all this stuff happens. You've probably seen the movie, I don't need to go through everything that happens. Basically, Dev Patel's character lives his life. And at the end of his life, he takes off his green sash thing and his head falls off, as it would have if it was chopped off by the Green Knight. But then we cut back to when Dev Patel is in front of the Green Knight. He hasn't run away. It's almost like he's had a vision of what would happen if he ran away, and he decides it's not worth it. He's gonna just take the blow. So when they cut back, you think, okay, we've got that all load of bollocks. It sounded terrible. It was hard to watch. It was pointless in places. But now we're back to here. Something interesting is going to happen. He takes off his green sash. The Green Knight says, okay, well done. Now off with your head, he says. And it pops up the Green Knight on screen. And the way it just pops up on screen is almost like a comedy movie. Sure, it's left up to your imagination. Does the Green Knight knock his head off? Does he become the Green Knight? Does the Green Knight let him live? Who knows with this movie what else happens. The giant probably comes along and like has his way with all of them. And then even further on from that, there's a post-credits scene, because you know every movie needs a post-credits scene where a little girl comes along and she puts on the crown that the others are wearing. There's so many parts in this movie that are interesting visually, like the giants and the scene with the talking fox and the Green Knight himself, as I mentioned. But there is so much bollocks in the movie. And some of the story stuff is fine. It's a little bit wacky, it's a little bit crazy, but you want that in fantasy movies. It's just very, very badly told. And visually, it looks good, but sound-wise, in places, it's terrible. Editing-wise, it's not good at all. It's incoherent throughout a lot of the movie. It's one of the worst directed movies I've ever seen. And as I mentioned earlier in the movie, this director directed Pete's Dragon, the reboot. I like the original Pete's Dragon. And yeah, sure, maybe it's just that I'm older now, but when I watched the Pete's Dragon reboot, I literally just watched 10 minutes and turned it off because I was so damn bored. The movie was so dragged out, and that's definitely the case with The Green Knight. It's so dragged out in places to a ridiculous level that adds nothing to the movie, and the movie overall is a very difficult to watch. I 100% would have turned this movie off if I was not reviewing it for the channel. And does that make it the worst movie I watched on this channel? Because I sat down after this and I was talking to my brother about this movie, who watched it as well, and we ended up talking for like an hour about the movie, because there was a lot to talk about, how this was bad and that was bad and this was terrible and why did this happen. This movie will have you talking with people who watch it as well, but not for good reasons. You'll be wondering, why the hell did they do this thing that had no payoff? And why did they do this other thing that had no payoff? And so much of the movie has no payoff and no relevance to the rest of the story. It's just stuff happens for the sake of it. Like the scenes with the giants, that could have been really cool, but it had no payoff whatsoever. This movie definitely falls foul of one of Hollywood's biggest flaws. All the best parts are in the trailer. If you want to enjoy The Green Knight, watch the trailer and don't watch the movie. Just tell yourself it's great. The weird thing is, critics are giving this amazing scores across the board. It's getting like 87% on Rotten Tomatoes. Audiences seem to have a bit more cop on. It's getting like 40% on Rotten Tomatoes from audiences. Now, I'm sure there's going to be people in the comment section who completely disagree, and I would love to know why, because I just don't get it. I just don't get it. Now, someone's going to tell me I'm an idiot, and here's why this is like the greatest allegory of life that anyone's ever told. And to that I say bollocks. Definitely the worst Christmas movie I've ever watched. So ultimately, it comes down to my rating, and what am I going to give The Green Knight as a rating? I've thought long and hard about this since I watched the movie. As I said, it's one of the worst movies I've watched in a long time. But is it the worst movie I've watched on the channel? For me personally, I believe that was The Midnight Sky. That was awful. I can't remember what I gave that. I can't imagine I gave it more than a 2. 1 out of 10. I think that's the first 1 out of 10 on the channel. I could be wrong, correct me if you know. But yeah, The Green Knight, 1 out of 10. Awful. Don't watch it if you haven't seen it. But let me know your thoughts on The Green Knight in the comments section below. Do you agree it's the greatest load of bollocks, or are you insane and you think this is a good movie? Let me know in the comments section below. With all that being said and done, thank you so much for watching.